Okay, part three of chapter 8 about the First Amendment. We're still continuing about speech. I want to get into political correctness now a little bit more. Um, Political correctness is the most dangerous idea that has ever been created in American politics, bar none. Period. End of story. Political correctness in its current form, not just the potential, but actual most damage ever done to our system, our culture, our way of life as Americans. Where did it come from? Well, the it came from the free speech movement, believe it or not. Throughout the campuses of the United States where the growing movement of free speech started, it morphed later into this hatred, out and out hatred, really, of the inability of these radicals and revolutionaries of the 1960s to have their way. And over the years, it morphed further into an idea that was created on these campuses of a means by which, since they can't legally force anyone to say the things they want them to say, or more importantly, not say the things they don't want them to say, we can trick them by bullying them or shaming them into saying the things they should be saying. And thus was born the idea of PC, political correctness. And it started out in very small, meaningless little changes to our speech back in the 70s, a little bit more in the 80s. What's acceptable, what's not acceptable, who's determining this, of course, is 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, good God help us. But that's where it started to come from. The lexicon of the or the English spoken word American version of English was being manipulated through the liberalized dictionaries of Webster's and whatnot. These new words were becoming used and therefore part of our lexicon, and later they became mandatory over other words. And this was found to be working. And when they were able to make these words work for them, and by inserting them into our lexicon, and then getting people to agree that it's preferred to use that word over a different word, they realized they had something. They really had some power over the way people talked and maybe even the way they thought. So they started to utilize this technique into more and more controversial and political avenues. It led to almost everything that we deal with liberals today. It's led to multiculturalism. It has led to all the euphemisms that we use today to protect our more growing snowflake society from being offended. It is used to manipulate the government. It is used to manipulate the way we write laws. It is used in schools to indoctrinate children. It is used in the courts. It is used everywhere in American society today. It is permeated and infused itself into all aspects of our culture. To now we are handcuffed into a tunnel vision of the left that promotes only this and nothing else. And if you are now caught outside of that tunnel of acceptable behavior, thought, speech, etc., you are ostracized, marginalized. You are attacked, both verbally and physically. If you do not fall in line, toe the line of conventional wisdom, you are made to become a pariah in society. At least that's their attempt. Now, homie, don't play that game. So, to you, political correctness and all of your adherents, your creators and your benefactors, I spit on your attempts to control me and my fellow Americans. If you can't take it, beat it. Can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. And what happened to the rugged American, the rugged individual? What happened to our ability to overcome, to withstand, to adapt? All of this is stripped away for political correctness. We'll cut our nose to spite our face, all for political correctness. We'll send people into harm's way. We'll put women in combat. It's a matter of whether they can do a thing. It's whether or not they should do a thing. You guys are so pent up on whether we should allow, when we can't allow a thing, you never stop to think of whether it should be done. Why would you put the very group of people, women, who propagate our species in front of harm's way? Makes no sense. Now, if they want to do it, great, but why are you forcing it? Multiculturalism. The idea that our culture, American culture, A, doesn't really exist because it's too diverse to be considered a unique culture. And two, it's no better than any other culture on the planet. Therefore, in school, our kids are being taught everything else but what it means to be an American. That there's nothing special about America. And that most of the stuff that Americans think they hold near and dear are based on lies or violence or xenophobia or any other heinous thing they can come up with in order to minimalize the greatness and special nature of our country. So the liberals use political correctness as a tool, but they also use it as a weapon. And one of the great areas that they've managed to pull this off is in the gay marriage issue, with the gay marriage issue. So I have a dictionary from 1975. It was given to me on my bar mitzvah by my uncle. It's a Webster's Dictionary. It's a beautiful tome, gold leafing and all this other stuff. And in it, under the letter M, is the word marriage. And in that definition, the definition of marriage, it said, a union, legal union, or otherwise, of a man and a woman. And the definition is pretty plain, it's pretty succinct, and it's quite specific. A man and a woman. 1975. Now, I would urge anybody, I'll even show it to you if somebody decides they want to actually email me or comment saying, prove that, be happy to. Now, if you go online to Webster's Dictionary Online, which is where they now, like to put their stuff, the definition of marriage has changed. It now says legal union or otherwise between a man and woman or members of the same sex or something to that effect. In other words, they've altered the meaning of marriage. Now, I put it to you. Marriage is an institution that's been around for about 5,000 years. It was the very basis under which our civilization, or any civilization, was created. Before marriage, men would roam and go off and have multiple women. They would not stay at home to teach their children the trade that they themselves learned. They would have to start every generation had to start all over because nobody was teaching their children what to do. They weren't hanging around long enough to tend a farm and grow a farm so their own family and their neighbors could eat. Civilization could not get started. The idea of marriage was to keep the man home and loyal to one person, theoretically, although some cultures still had multiple marriages to multiple women, but at least it brought them home to teach their children the trade that they knew, whether it was smithing or farming or building or whatever, so that civilization had a way of starting and building on itself and getting improvements and learning new things and growing and expanding and exploring and inventing and all this other stuff. But it couldn't ever get itself started without marriage. It's a very old, important institution, and it only worked between a man and woman because that's how we propagated our species, a man and a woman. Remember I mentioned tab A still goes into slot B. There's no other way for this to work. We had to have more people, more children, in order to grow civilization. Now you may say, oh, that's all antiquated now because now we have overpopulation. We have too many children, blah, 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 blah. So a few lesbians and gays doesn't matter because we're not adding to the population and blah, blah, blah. Okay, lovely, but that doesn't make any common sense with regard to nature. The only thing that really should matter. Nature says man and woman, and that's what it should be. You want to do it another way? Go ahead, but don't argue with me about how that's natural. Or helping civilization in any way. Doesn't. May not hurt it, but doesn't help it. Now, marriage. I dare anybody, I challenge anybody to go find one other example of any word in the English language, and maybe any language, I don't know the other languages well enough to say, but in the current English language, when a word has been altered, has had its meaning altered. Now, many words have had meanings added to it. You know, synonyms, for instance, or, well, not synonyms, they basically be, a word that means something new. The word gay, for instance. And up until the middle of the 20th century, I would imagine, maybe before that, but pretty much up to that point, the word gay meant happy. Free of spirit, what have you. Free spirit. The word didn't change. It still means that. We may not use it in that way, but if you look at a dictionary, it still means that. But now it also means, as a second meaning, below the original meaning, somebody who likes someone of the same, sexually likes someone of the same gender as they are. But it didn't have to change the original meaning in order for that to be added to it. But marriage is different. Marriage, they actually changed the meaning. They didn't say it's a union, legal union between a man and a woman, and the second meaning, can now also mean a legal union between people who say, no, it's between a man and a woman or somebody of the same. Now, this may seem semantic. This may seem, petty, picky, but it's important. And I don't mean it just from my right-wing perspective of the assault on marriage, which this clearly is, because this could have been done a different way, which we'll get into maybe another time. They didn't have to go after the meaning of marriage, but they did. And they did that partly because of not just the war on straight people, or heterosexuals, if you will, in favor of the special needs, apparently, of the gay community, but the war on Christianity, because marriage was also considered to be, or religion, I should say, a religious affectation that atheists and others don't necessarily believe in, and don't think that is required for them to do whatever the hell they want to do or not do. So they have a anti-religious connotation to anti-marriage group and the war on the word and the changing of the word. Because there's no reason they couldn't have come up with a different word and gotten all the same benefits they think they were kept from and all the same legal rights that married people have. Nope, they didn't do that. They had to go after the meaning of marriage. And that only one culprit, political correctness, behind all of that and all the things we're talking about. Political correctness thinks it's important to attack religion because religion somehow suppresses or advocates, I should say, the things that offend them. And that, God forbid, they should be offended. They should never be offended. We should be all protected. We need our safe spaces. We need to la 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 all the way through our lives because of those mean, ornery words that people might say in our presence. So the idea of political correctness, which started out as a somewhat feeble attempt to water down our speech, has become a weapon against our culture and our way of life. You know, George Carlin, a famous comedian, I agreed and disagree with him probably on equal measure. But he was an absolute believer in free speech in its original meaning. He couldn't stand the euphemisms that the culture would promote. He couldn't stand people didn't understand what words meant. He made jokes out of it, but it really bugged him. He would have long soliloquies about what words really mean and how people misuse them. And one of his biggest beefs was about euphemisms, the watering down of words to make them more palatable or audible for people to hear. One of his most famous ones had to do with PTSD. He said, you know, in World War I, we called it battle fatigue. You know, it had the word battle in it, and it sounded, you know, rough and tumble and fatigue. You know, then it became in World War II or Vietnam, whatever. Later on, it became you know, something sounded nicer. I forget the words, and now it's PTSD. I think it went through like 4 iterations of this, the same thing. No, shell shock, I think, was the first one. Then battle fatigue, and now it's post-traumatic stress disorder. All to protect somebody from this harsh sounding thing of shell shock or battle fatigue, what have you. As if those words somehow could hurt someone even worse than they're already feeling. He couldn't stand this kind of talk. He said, say what it is. Call a spade, for God's sakes. Well, we're not allowed to do that anymore. I still do. But society has decided that that's not the way to go. And we can blame it all on the foot of political correctness, which now is doing everything to undermine our society, to destroy it from within, to make it seem, you know, have a certain aspect that it never really intended to have. It's not a natural thing. It's not an evolutionary thing. It's forced. And those are the things that drive me the most crazy, is this forcing of society down a certain path. Usually it's a leftward path. And we need to fight it as strongly as we fought anything else, because it is unraveling the quilt of our country. It is tipping the melting pot over. It is destroying everything we hold dear. Political correctness is the absolute worst idea has ever come down the pike, and what needs to be utterly destroyed. So in my final segment, we'll talk about the press clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution. See you then.